While digging a well, the rancher uncovered a hidden cellar and heard a woman breathing. The pick hit something hollow on the third day. Not rock, not root, something built. I'd been at it since before light, trying to get down past the caliche layer on the south end of the pasture where the ground always ran dry come July. My shoulder was bad that season, old break that healed sideways, so I was working one-armed half the time, leaning the pick more than swinging it, and the progress was ugly. Wasn't no one watching. Hadn't been anyone on that land but me for 4 years. The hollow sound came just after noon. I stopped, struck again in the same spot, softer, the same dull give. I got down on one knee and scraped away the loose dirt with my hand and found edge-cut stone, flat and deliberate, somebody's work. Old work. The mortar between the stones had gone to chalk. The whole cap, when I cleared it, was maybe 6 feet across, dry laid, covered with maybe 2 feet of compacted earth that somebody had tamped down intentional. I sat back on my heels and ate half a biscuit I had in my coat pocket and looked at it a while. It wasn't an old well. The shape was wrong, too wide, and the stones were set level, not curved. Somebody had wanted this hidden. I pried the corner stone with the pick and the whole cap shifted. Came up in sections, chalky dust rising off each piece. The hole underneath was stone-lined, maybe 7 feet across, a root cellar or a hide. The ladder set into the wall was wrought soft. The bottom 2 rungs crumbled when I tested them. So I rigged a rope off the saddle horn and went down hand over hand, maybe 12 feet, and my boots hit a packed dirt floor. There wasn't much light, just the square of sky above me and what came through it. I stood still and let my eyes adjust. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not animal breathing. A slow, deliberate, controlled sound coming from the dark corner to my left, the sound of someone trying very hard not to be heard. I did not move fast. If somebody was down here hiding, coming at them hard was a good way to get a blade in the throat. I turned slow, said plain as I could, "I'm not going to hurt you." Silence. "I'm the man who owns this land. I was digging a well. I'm sorry to have found you, but I have found you, and I'd like to know if you need help." A long quiet. "Then are you alone?" A woman's voice, low, hoarse, like it hadn't been used in some days. "I am," I said. Another long quiet. "How do I know?" "You don't," I said. "I could go back up and stay at the top if you want to come out yourself. Give you space." She didn't answer that. I heard a slow shift of weight. Then she came out of the dark corner. Not standing, not yet, she'd been down low against the wall, a blanket pulled around her, and she came up in stages, cautious, her hand braced against the stone. She was maybe 30, dark-haired, thin in the way that means days without eating, not by nature. There was a bruise along her jaw that had gone yellow at the edges, a few days old at least. Her eyes went straight to the rope and the square of daylight above and then to me, measuring the distance, measuring me. "I'm going to step back," I said, and I did. Gave her as much of the small space as I could. "Who owns this land?" she said. "I do, Elias Cade. Been mine since '69. You know a man named Pryor." It wasn't a question. The way she said it told me she'd already worked out that everybody in the valley knew Pryor one way or another. "I know who he is," I said. She watched me, and nothing good," I said. "I've had words with his riders twice. They cut my fence line last spring and I said what I said about it to his face. We're not friends." She watched me another beat. Something behind her eyes shifted. Not relief, she wasn't ready for relief, but a slight easing. Like she'd been holding a door shut against something and let herself shift her weight off it a little. "I need water," she said. Her name was Clara Voss. She told me that much, and not a lot more at first, which was her right. I got her out of the cellar, got her to the house, got her water and what food I had: biscuits, dried beef, half a pot of cold beans I reheated, and I sat on the other side of the table and didn't ask her anything she didn't volunteer. She'd been down in that hole for 4 days. She'd found it herself, weeks before, when she'd been picking her way across the back pasture at night and her foot went through a rotten board someone had thrown over the cap. She'd remembered it, had reason to, as things turned out. I learned the shape of the trouble in pieces over that first afternoon. Pryor had brought her out from back east as a paid housekeeper for his main property near Harlow. That's how it was framed. She was widowed, needed work. It looked honest enough on paper. What it was in practice was something closer to property. She'd run in the night 3 weeks ago with nothing but what she could carry, and she'd been moving slow and careful across the back country ever since, staying off the main tracks, staying off Pryor's land. She'd been heading for the settlement at Merriam, 40 miles east, where she had a sister. She hadn't made it. She'd been 2 days from Merriam when Pryor's men found her trail and she'd had to go to ground. The cellar was the only hole she had. She told me all of this in a flat, even voice, not asking for anything, just laying out the facts the way you explain a situation to a doctor. She was not a woman who leaned into her suffering. That was clear. "Are his men still looking?" I said. "I don't know. I stopped hearing horses 2 days ago." "That could mean they gave up," I said, "or it could mean they got smarter." She looked at me across the table. "I know what it could mean," she said. I didn't apologize for saying it. She didn't want that. I gave her the back room. I slept with my rifle across the foot of the bed the way I hadn't done in a while. She did not argue about the room. I think she was past the point of argument about anything. She was running on pride and whatever a body keeps in reserve after pride runs out. She was asleep before I'd finished getting the stove banked down. I sat up a while in the kitchen with the lamp low and thought about what I was in the middle of. Pryor was not a man you crossed lightly. He had 3 or 4 men working for him who were not ranch hands in any honest sense of the word. He'd run 2 families off their homestead claims in the valley before mine, using methods that never quite made it to a law complaint. The sheriff at Harlow was a man who'd been bought and mostly stayed bought. I knew all of this. I also knew what I was going to do, and it wasn't complicated. She was on my land, she'd asked for help, and I was going to help her. That was the whole calculation. I'd never been someone who could look past a thing that was plainly wrong and go on about his business. Got me into trouble more than once. But you are what you are. The question was how. Getting her to Merriam overland the way she'd been going was not quick. The main road was too exposed. The backcountry route added 3 days and I couldn't leave the ranch that long. The stage didn't run to Merriam, only east to the railhead. But Dolph Bayer, who ran freight out of the crossing 12 miles south, made a run to Merriam every 10 days or so, and I figured he was due within the week. Dolph was a man you could trust. He'd known me a long time. I could keep her here until Dolph's run, maybe a week. A week was manageable if Pryor's men didn't find the trail. I was thinking through what that might require when I heard a sound from outside and had the rifle up before I'd fully stood from the chair. Just a horse moving along the fence line. Mine, gone to the south pasture for the evening. I put the rifle down and sat back down and felt my heartbeat slow. I was 51 years old and I had been jumpy once before like this, long ago, during a period in my life I didn't generally visit. It was not a pleasant feeling to recognize. But I wasn't sorry she was there. That surprised me a little. 4 years alone on that land and I'd gotten good at aloneness, had got it shaped and fitted to me like a worn coat. Now there was a woman asleep in the back room and a lamp burning and the stove still giving off some heat, and the place felt different, fuller. It did not feel like a burden. She was up before me the next morning. I came out of the bedroom and found her at the stove, fire already built, coffee already on. She'd found the flour and was working biscuit dough with a focus that shut out everything else in the room. "You didn't have to," I said. "I know," she said and didn't look up. I sat down and she put coffee in front of me without being asked, the same way she'd done the dough, not serving exactly. More like she'd decided to be useful, and was going to be useful, and that was that. We ate mostly quiet. I told her my thinking about Dolph Bayer and the freight run, and she listened without interrupting, and when I finished she said, "That's good thinking." Then she said, "I'm not going to hide in this house the whole time." "All right," I said. "I'll stay inside the property. I won't go near the road, but I'm not going to sit in a room." "I didn't ask you to," I said. She looked at me then. A real look, not the measuring kind she'd been using, like she was checking whether I meant it. "All right," she said. The days had a shape to them after that. She was not idle, she couldn't be. I understood that about her, so she took over the kitchen without being asked, put things right in the house that had gone crooked under 4 years of one person's inattention. Not that she said anything about the state of it. She just fixed it. She patched a broken window latch. She restrung a corner of the barn where the wire had gone slack and a board had started pulling away from the post. I saw her out there one afternoon with the fence pliers, doing it exactly right, and stood and watched a moment before I walked on, not wanting to make her feel watched. I was out on the range most of each day. The work didn't stop because I had company. The south pasture fence needed another quarter-mile of new wire. 2 of the calves were looking rough, and I still had to get the well finished before the dry season. The ground, now that I'd found the cellar, had to be rerouted to the west side of the pasture, more digging, harder soil. I didn't say anything about that. It wasn't her fault there was a stone cellar under my pasture. In the evenings we talked. Not much at first, then more. She was from Indiana originally, had come west with her husband a decade ago, had buried him 2 winters back from a lung sickness. She talked about him plainly, without performing grief, the way you talk about someone who is truly gone and part of you, and that is just a fact of your life. Her sister in Miriam was married to a man who ran a small dry goods store. She had plans to help with the store, to rebuild something. She talked about it practically. She asked about me 3rd evening. Not around it, not politely, just, "What happened here before you were alone?" I told her. My wife had died of fever 8 years ago. My son had left, not badly, not with anger. He'd just gone to Oregon because there was land cheaper up there and he had his own life to make. We wrote twice a year. I'd stayed on the ranch because I'd built it and I didn't know what else I was or where else I was supposed to be. I'd got used to it. I hadn't been especially unhappy. She listened to all of this and didn't offer me sympathy and didn't try to make it smaller than it was. She just nodded once when I finished, like she'd placed a piece somewhere in her mind. "You're a steady man," she said. I didn't know what to do with that, so I didn't say anything. On the 6th day Pryor's men came. I saw them from the ridge south of the barn, 2 riders, coming up the main track from the road in no particular hurry, the kind of pace men ride when they're making a point about being unhurried. I knew the one in front, a man named Colbert who rode for Pryor and had been one of the men there when the fence was cut. The other I didn't recognize. I rode down slow and came to the gate before they did and stopped there and waited on horseback. I did not want this in the yard. They pulled up about 10 feet from me. Colbert looked around, looked at the house, looked back at me. "Cade," he said. "Colbert. Mr. Pryor's looking for a woman, dark-haired, came from the east about a month back. You seen anyone like that come through here?" "No," I said. He looked at me a moment, straight answer. "It's the one you're getting," I said. "I haven't seen anyone come through here." "She's Mr. Pryor's property," he said. "That's how he thinks of it." "A woman's not property," I said. "I don't care how any man thinks of it." Something shifted in Colbert's face. Not anger, more like the look of a man making a new calculation. He glanced at the house again. "That's an interesting view," he said. "It's the only one I have on the subject," I said. "And I'll tell you the same thing I told Mr. Pryor about the fence. Anything that comes onto my land without my say-so, I consider a trespass, and I handle it accordingly. That gate is my line." A long pause. His horse shifted under him. The other man didn't say anything. "Mr. Pryor might want to discuss that with you himself," Colbert said. "He knows where I am," I said. They sat there another beat, and then Colbert turned his horse and they rode back the way they'd come, the same unhurried pace, and I watched them until they were back to the main road and turned east. I sat at the gate a few minutes more, just to be sure it was over for now, and then I rode back to the barn. Clara was at the kitchen window when I came inside. She'd watched it from there. She'd have seen what it looked like from a distance. 2 men, me at the gate, them going. She looked at me and said, "Colbert." "Yes." "What did you tell him?" "That you weren't here, and that the gate was my line." She was quiet a moment. "Then he believed you about me not being here." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. They'll have to decide whether it's worth pressing." She looked at me across the kitchen, and what was in her face was not soft. It was something harder than that, more real. She knew what I'd done. She knew what it might cost me. She wasn't sentimental about it, and she wasn't going to pretend it was nothing. "Elias," she said, first time she'd used my name. "It's all right," I said. "No," she said, "let me say it." She came around the table. She put her hand flat on the center of my chest, just her hand, just still, and she looked at me straight on. "You didn't have to do that. You don't owe me anything. What you did at that gate and the cellar and the room and all of it, that's not a thing most men do." I looked at her. I was aware of her hand, the pressure of it. "What I want you to know," she said, "is that I see it." Those were the words. I didn't have an answer for them. They sat inside me somewhere below speech. I put my hand over hers just for a moment. She didn't pull away. Dolph Bayer came through 2 days later like I'd expected. He was on his way to Merriam by the long route, would take 3 days, but it was safe, and he knew the backcountry roads, and he was a man who kept his business to himself. I'd already sent him a note by way of the Haverson boy who ran errands along the valley, asking if he'd carry a passenger. He'd sent back one word: yes. The morning she left, she came out into the yard with the small pack she'd carried into that cellar. She'd washed her dress and pressed it. She was wearing her hair up. She stood in the morning light and looked at the ranch, the pasture, the ridge, and then she looked at me. "You should finish that well," she said. "I intend to," I said. "West of the cellar, you said." "Yes." A pause. She looked down at her boots, then back up. "I'm going to write to you when I get to my sister's." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it in a way I hadn't meant much lately. She stepped forward and she took hold of my arm just above the wrist, both hands wrapped around it, and she looked up at me and I felt the grip of it, solid, deliberate, the grip of a woman who doesn't reach for things lightly. "You're a good man, Elias Cade," she said. "Don't you let anyone tell you otherwise." Dolph came around with the wagon. She let go my arm and picked up her pack and walked to the wagon, and I helped her up, and Dolph clicked at the horses and they went on down the track south. I watched the wagon until it turned at the cottonwood stand and was gone. Then I picked up my pick from against the barn wall and walked out to the south pasture and got back in the trench on the west side of the cellar where the soil was looser, and I swung the pick, and the sound of it was different than it had been 3 weeks before. Not lonesome, just work. She wrote like she said she would, 3 pages, in a hand that was plain and direct and said what it meant. Her sister was well, the store was doing all right, she had a place of her own in a house 2 streets from the main road. She said she thought about the ranch sometimes, the shape of the ridge against the evening sky, and a particular evening in the kitchen when the lamp was burning low. She said she wondered if I'd finished the well. I wrote back. Told her the well was finished, good water at 22 feet, and the south pasture was holding its grass through the dry stretch better than any year I could remember. Told her Pryor had not come back, that there'd been some business in the county about him that I'd heard only in pieces, but that he was looking less powerful than he had. Told her I was well. I asked if she might be willing to write again. She wrote again. and then again after that. The third letter ended different from the other two. She said she'd been thinking about something she'd said to me in the kitchen, and she was sorry she'd said it so plainly, and she hoped I didn't find it strange. I wrote back and told her that I'd kept that one line somewhere close in my mind ever since, and that she should not be sorry for it at all. That there were things you carried around in a quiet way for years, things you'd given up expecting anyone to ever see, and then a woman looks you straight on and she says, "I see it." I told her that a man doesn't forget that. She was in the yard in late October when I arrived in Merriam. I'd written ahead. I'd left the ranch in the hands of the Haverson boy for a week, which I'd never done before, and I'd ridden 2 days, and when I came down the main street, I saw her standing at the gate of the house she'd described, wearing a dark dress and her hair up the way she'd had it the morning she left. She didn't run out, she wasn't that kind. She opened the gate and stood in it and waited for me to dismount and come to her, which I did. She looked at me, that same straight, clear look. "You came," she said. "I said I would," I said. She put her hand up to my jaw, the way you do when you want to see someone's face clearly, and she held it there a moment, and I stood still for it. Her eyes were level and certain. "I'm glad," she said. The cottonwoods along the street were going yellow in the October cold. Somewhere nearby, a door opened and closed. The horses in the livery down the road shifted and stamped. She lowered her hand and took hold of mine, turned toward the house. We went inside out of the wind.